I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KrisAnne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come
on! Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KrisAnne Hall Show. KrisAnne Hall here. KrisAnnehall.com. I am happy to be here, as I am happy to be here every day. It is really an honor and a privilege to know that Liberty First Mission has this venue, that we have people who so want to hear the truth that they're willing to hear it from some crazy lady in Florida that nobody knows about. Isn't that awesome? I mean, I just was so amazed, this weekend, teaching a whole bunch of people who came to hear my 6-hour workshop who've never heard of me before. What an amazing leap of faith for people to come and spend an entire Saturday learning about the Constitution from someone who isn't named Glenn Beck or Sarah Palin or some politician, right? This is the evidence to me that people want to know more about the Constitution. They want to fix America, and they love America. Because otherwise, you wouldn't come out to an event like that. And people are, I just want to tell you, it is so humbling to me how enthused people are once they get the information that I teach in my lessons. We taught this weekend probably over 1,000 people just this weekend. And the response to the information that we give is so very encouraging. You know, part of the problem that we have in America is that people simply don't have the knowledge necessary to have the courage to take a stand. You think we vote the lesser of two evils because evil is all we have. No, we vote the lesser of two evils because evil's all we know. There's a difference. We don't know any better. We have allowed the government to teach our children and dictate our curriculum for so long. The American people do not know constitutional good when they see it. Not only that, not knowing constitutional good when they see it, they clamor for constitutional bad. I mean, it's just the language, okay? We have to correct our language. I want you to, from this day forward, correct everyone you hear make this mistake. And I'm serious, because we are enslaving ourselves through this dictate of words. Because words matter. They really do. Speaking truth matters. Speaking clarity matters. Because when you speak a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. Why? Not because a lie fundamentally becomes true. A lie can never fundamentally become true. A lie becomes a truth because we begin to believe it as true. It no longer is believed to be a lie when you repeat it long enough. And so I'm looking at this article on the internet. There was a court opinion issued just recently, federal appeals court in Cincinnati, and the headlines everywhere about this. Court rules you can be held liable for the contents of your butt dials. And I love the headline. You can read it everywhere because I think journalists are just really excited about the fact that they get to make a headline using the word butt. Come on now, we all still have a little 13-year-old, 6-year-old inside of us that thinks it's funny to say and read the word but, okay? But here's the headline. Court rules. A federal appeals court in Cincinnati ruled that someone who accidentally calls someone else isn't protected by a right to privacy, blah, 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 blah. The court ruled. No. Courts don't issue rulings. Kings issue rulings. Hello? We need to get out of this kingdom mentality. Courts issue opinions. And you are no more legally bound by a court's opinion than by your neighbor's opinion when that court's opinion violates the fundamental principles of natural law and liberty. That's the bottom line we've got to address here. There is a natural order of things, a natural law that is a higher law than any man's law. And the natural law proclaims that government, no matter which branch it may be, executive, legislative, or judicial, has no authority to take your liberty without due process. And this ruling, as it were, not. See, I want you to hear that now. Do you realize that the courts can operate outside of due process? Even the court process can be outside of due process. Courts have no authority to issue opinions that your stuff doesn't belong to you just because. The only way government is empowered to have any power over your stuff is if you use your liberty to violate someone else's, if you cause someone else harm. That's the extent of your loss of liberty. That's the only time the government is supposed to have the power to interfere with your liberty is when you have violated someone else's. It's the same with speech. It's the same with everything. Your liberty is intact until you abuse that to hurt someone else. And how does accidentally making a phone call hurt someone else? It does not. Your liberty has not violated or transgressed anybody else's liberty, and so therefore no one has a right to your property. But this court says otherwise, which is a huge move for a court to begin with, because the courts have almost generally, throughout history, sided with the people who accidentally sent things to people they didn't mean to send. Letters, faxes. Those types of things have always been guarded, and it was not an automatic release of privacy. But now this federal appeals court in Cincinnati issued their opinion. You see, you can really, really identify people who are misled and miseducated and spreading the lies of progressiveness by their language. You really can. Listen to Fox News and see how many people talk about court rulings. Does Megyn Kelly say court opinions, or does she say court rulings? Does Greta Van Susteren talk about court opinions, or does she remark on court rulings? You can really identify the extent of someone's understanding of the Constitution by simply listening to their language. And then you may correct them. And then identify who those are who are too arrogant or ignorant to be corrected. Someone needs to tell Megyn Kelly and Greta Van Susteren and all of those on Fox that courts don't make rulings, they issue opinions. And when those opinions are contrary to liberty, they have no legal force at all. See how they accept that information. They may go on a rant about, I don't know, anarchy and lawlessness and our duty to obey the law, and yet forget that courts don't write law. There's a whole separation of powers there, remember? Courts don't issue rulings, and they don't make law. That's why their rulings are not rulings, they're opinions. Because if we elevate their opinions to rulings, then we violate the very principle of separation of powers, and we give the courts the authority to make law. And that should never be so. Montesquieu said that when you consolidate power into one branch or one man, liberty is lost. Liberty is exterminated. And that's why we've got to correct our language. The Federal Appeals Court in Cincinnati made no rulings because they are not our kings. They issue opinions. And that goes for the Supreme Court as well. I understand those oligarchy of 9 decided in 1803 that they were the ultimate rulers of the universe. However, that does not change their authority. It does not change the fact that they were only delegated very few and enumerated powers as well. And when you read their enumerated powers, you understand that the Supreme Court was never, ever delegated power to issue any opinions or rulings over the states. No federal court, by Constitution, has any authority over the states. None whatsoever. And the courts, creating that authority, expanding that authority, gives them the power to create their own authority and create their own limits to power. And any branch of government that can create its own limits is not limited at all, is it? And a government not limited by the Constitution and by the people is not a republic. It's a totalitarian government. And when we talk about court rulings, what we do is admit that we are subjects to the totalitarian governmental rule of the court system. Let's change our reality.
KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Well, the Congress is pushing forward this, quote, must-pass highway legislation. And this is something that we really need to look into because this is unlimited government in its works. This is big government in its works. And we need to be opposed to this, and we need to oppose anybody who votes for this. There is no constitutional authority for the federal government to engage in funding of roads in general. This highway, must-pass highway legislation is nothing but a toll road for all the roads, is creating a toll road for all the roads in the United States. Any tax dollars collected to support the Federal Department of Transportation creates a national toll road. Why? Because you have to pay taxes to drive on roads. No, I don't care if you do that on a local government. Well, I guess I do, because that's not liberty either, but from a real constitutional perspective, that should be the power of the state. And if the people don't want toll roads, they should take the pitchforks and torches to their state capital. But there is no authority within the Constitution of the United States for the federal government to collect money to fund roads in general. It's just not there. And now we have a new crisis. A new crisis involving a power that simply doesn't exist. And the crazy thing is these must-pass legislations. They always have these must-pass legislations, like the National Defense Authorization Act and the Federal Transportation Acts and the, whatever funding we can't live without. And within these must-pass bills, they become Trojan horses for all kinds of stuff that simply have no application. Case in point. So, GOP Senator Ted Cruz tries to put some stuff in the transportation bill to defund Planned Parenthood. All right, so I exalt his effort to defund Planned Parenthood. We should be defunding Planned Parenthood. It's not a role of the federal government. If you want to help women with their health care and their health needs, that is a state power, not a federal power. Okay? And this whole idea of Planned Parenthood harvesting body parts is something that, we should be appalled by, and we should not be funding as a whole. We shouldn't be funding at all. Just something occurred to me. Something just occurred to me. So Planned Parenthood is harvesting. We'll get back to the transportation thing in a minute. I don't want to lose this thought. Planned Parenthood is harvesting body parts for sale. But I thought there was no life in those body parts, and that's why we could chop them up and exterminate them. No life in those body parts, but why are we harvesting them for research? How do dead things help us research how living things work? The one video said, they're looking for intact hearts because they want to study how those specific nodes operate in us. Well, if those are just pieces of tissue with no value whatsoever, and it's not murder and it's not about life, then how can we learn anything about our life from them? Why are we outraged? Why do we buy cosmetics and shampoos and stuff that say no animal testing was performed in this the creation or the maintenance of this product, and we flock to Whole Foods to buy those things, and yet we're not outraged by the fact that Planned Parenthood is harvesting baby hearts for research purposes, going through their list of clients to know what they need to do so they have the proper body parts for research. And if they're just worthless pieces of tissue, why do they have such value in research? See, we need to think about these things instead of accepting the brainwashing and the political mantra to teach us that we're worthless pieces of flesh.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
We wonder why we're in such a moral dilemma, right? When the government is running around teaching our children for decades that we're just nothing but worthless pieces of flesh. I don't think you can look a child in the face and say, we believe that your mother had the right to murder you, that you have absolutely no value whatsoever, that your mother could have murdered you, and perhaps should have, because you're just a worthless piece of flesh. How do you suppose that impacts the psyche of a child? Knowing that what grows in a mother's body is a worthless piece of flesh until she decides it has value. And then when they grow up with parents who spend no time with them and who berate them and think that things on television are more important than they are, doesn't that just simply reconfirm to them that they are worthless pieces of flesh and maybe their parents just made a mistake and didn't decide to discard them? I don't know. It's just about the way we think. That seems to be the mantra for today. Changing our reality by changing the way we speak and the way we think. So back to this transportation bill, right? So Cruz is trying to put some things in there because we know the value of Trojan horses. And I'm not criticizing Cruz, okay? I'm just simply saying that these are the Trojan horses. And the problem is that McConnell, who is the Senate Majority Leader, refused to allow Ted Cruz's amendments to the transportation bill, claiming they have no real relationship to transportation. Now, first and foremost, any of you guys that follow me on Facebook know, and on this radio should too, I've actually talked about this, that having majority leaders and committeemen with the power to refuse your representative's legislation to the floor is a denial of equal representation. A denial of Article 5 is what Senator Mitch McConnell is doing. Article 5 in the Constitution says that every state shall have equal suffrage in the Senate, meaning every senator will have an equal voice and an equal vote in the Senate. And when Mitch McConnell or anybody else says, no, your senator's amendment cannot be heard, your senator's voice cannot be heard, he is denying your state equal representation in the Senate. Senator Ted Cruz's people want these issues to be heard. He is representing the state of Texas. And for Mitch McConnell, a man, to say that Texas has no right to be heard in the Senate is tyranny. How do we allow one man to have that kind of power over 50 states? See, this is the way things work, and this is why it's wrong. Absolutely wrong. House rules and House leaders and House committees are absolutely antithetical to liberty and the understanding of equal representation of a republic. So Planned Parenthood has no relevance to transportation, and yet Mitch McConnell brought forward in the transportation bill a reestablishment of the Export-Import Bank. Yes. Can you believe that? The Export-Import Bank was an issue, an amendment to the transportation bill. So Mitch McConnell blocked Ted Cruz's bills. He says he blocked an amendment to defund Planned Parenthood. He blocked an amendment that would repeal the congressional exception from Obamacare. Yes, there's an exception to Congress in Obamacare. He doesn't want a vote on any of these things. Ted Cruz put forward an amendment called Kate's Law, a mandatory minimum 5-year for illegal alien convicted of illegal reentry. He blocked an amendment saying no Iranian sanctions can be lifted unless and until Iran recognizes Israel's right to exist and releases 4 American hostages that they're holding. McConnell says that doesn't belong in the transportation bill, but a deal regarding Trade Promotion Authority and the Import-Export Bank was allowed to be there. Trade TPA, remember? International Executive Orders. Mitch McConnell loves this TPA bill. He told us all on CBS that he loves this bill. Although it expands Obama's power, he loves this bill, this TPA authority, because it expands his president's authority as well, because Mitch McConnell knows that there will be a Republican president elected. We don't know who that Republican president may be, or we suppose we can pretend we don't know who that Republican president's going to be, but there will be a Republican president, and Mitch McConnell has let that cat out of the bag. They know this stuff. It's the Republicans' turn. Go look at the pattern. And so, all of Ted Cruz's and Texas bill amendments are outside transportation, but trade authority and foreign banking is not. And that is cronyism. You see, our Republican establishment, the party of the Constitution, has been hijacked, America. I don't know how any liberty-loving American can send another dime to the RNC. Not another dime. I don't know how anybody could fund the RNC at all, or fund anyone who funds the RNC, because all they are for big corporate cronyism. And Cruz calls them out on the Senate floor, and they go into a temper tantrum. Orrin Hatch, Lamar Alexander, John Cornyn, all having temper tantrums on the Senate floor because Ted Cruz spoke the truth. They didn't dispute what Ted Cruz was saying. They didn't prove that Ted Cruz was lying. No, they said you can't oppose the Mitch McConnell. You can't do that on the Senate floor. That's poor decorum. I want you to understand something here. These people just said that truth is poor decorum on the Senate floor. Hello? And you think that the battle over replacing John Boehner was ugly? Just wait and watch as people continue to oppose Mitch McConnell. How dare you? How dare you? Now let's talk about this transportation bill, because there's absolutely no authority in the Constitution for it. The only authority that the federal government has to have anything to do with roads is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7, to establish post offices and post roads. That's just the roads that the post office needs to go from state to state. And so basically what we're talking about here, right, this was just all this was about establishing a transportation between the states, linking the states together for the purpose of delivering the mail. If you go look at the records on the Federal Convention, Benjamin Franklin moved to add after the words post roads a power to provide for cutting canals where deemed necessary. Further clarification that this was just simply to create a bridge between the states. And the only thing they want him to do is maybe cut canals. So maybe through the mountains, that's what they mean, not canals through water, but bridges and cut through mountains and such a thing. And there was fear about this. They thought there were many that thought the power was unnecessary. They had hoped that this would be a way to encourage the postal system through the states and cooperation through the states. And so technically speaking, by intent, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7, the establishment of post roads, the only power delegated to the federal government would be that stretch of highway that runs from the end of one state into another. A bridge, just the length of highway that needed to bridge the roads from in one state to another, to encourage the states to continue their transportation. And that's it. And you know what? They've expanded that to all roads. James Madison warned us about that in his explanation of the General Welfare Clause in 1792. He warned that if we allowed Congress to use the General Welfare Clause or the Tax and Spending Clause or any of these clauses to authorize Congress to do whatever they think fit, that's his quote, provided it be for the general welfare, of which they are to judge, and money can be applied to it, Congress must have the power to create and support a judiciary establishment with a jurisdiction extending to all cases favorable, in their opinion, to the general welfare. In the same manner as they have the power to pass laws and apply money, providing it in any other way for the general welfare. He says if Congress can employ money indefinitely to the general welfare and are the sole and supreme judges of the general welfare, they may take care of religion into their own hands. They may appoint teachers in every state, county, and parish, and pay them out of their public treasury. They may take into their own hands the education of children, establishing in like manner schools, curriculum throughout the Union. They may assume provisions for the poor. They may undertake the regulation of all roads other than post roads. In short, everything from the highest object of state legislation down to the most minute object of police would be thrown under the power of Congress. For every object I have mentioned would admit the application of money and might be called, if Congress so pleased, provisions for the general welfare. And now Madison's warning becomes reality.
Hate me if you want, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crack it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none, except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So there's this big problem now with post roads, and James Madison told us that if you allow the Congress to determine their own limitations, that they will, without a doubt, expand their own power by simply claiming we need funding. But I want to read to you something that Thomas Jefferson wrote to James Madison on March 6, 1796. It's a postscript to a letter that he had written, and it's on this very topic, and it's very, very telling. Listen to this. Thomas Jefferson to James Madison. Quote, "Have you considered all the consequences of your proposition respecting post roads? I view it as a source of boundless patronage to the executive, jobbing to members of Congress and their friends, and a bottomless abyss of public money." Do you see that? He's like, look, you're going to be expanding the power of the executive branch. You're going to be encouraging cronyism in Congress, and they will be able to use money to spend on whatever they want. He says you will begin by only appropriating the surplus of the post office for revenues. Post office revenues. Do you see the establishment of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7, post roads, was so that the post office revenues would pay for that section of highway that links one state to another, to encourage the movement of the mail from state to state. And he says, look, you will begin by only appropriating the surplus of the post office revenues, but the other revenues will soon be called into their aid, and it will be a scene of eternal scrambling among the members who can get the most money wasted in their state. Isn't that how it works? Look at all the road construction, all the stimulus money, and all the transportation money, fixing roads that don't need to be fixed. Eternal and perpetual road construction for the maintenance of wasting money. He says, we have hitherto thought We have thought hitherto that the roads of a state could not be so well administered even by the state legislators as by the magistrates of the county on the spot. What will it be when a member of New Hampshire is to mark out a road for Georgia? Do you hear that? That is what Congress is doing. Some representative in New Hampshire, on some as a committee head on the transportation department, is now dictating to Georgia their roads and their money. Meanwhile, Georgia is scrambling among their politicians to see if they can get the most money to be wasted. Jefferson says, does the power to establish post roads given you by Congress mean that you shall make the roads, or only select those already made, those on which there shall be a post? This was supposed to be a limited power, and Jefferson knew that. But he's pointing out that it's a power that will be easily expanded by Congress through their want of executive power and their greed and love for cronyism, creating a bottomless abyss of public money. I don't think I've ever heard a better definition of the Department of Transportation. A bottomless abyss of public money. And every single state eternally scrambling for federal funding so they can waste your money eternally. And it was never supposed to be that way. It was just supposed to be so the mail could move from one state to the other. Which means any congressman that votes for this transportation bill lacks the understanding to have the responsibility and a power over appropriating public funds. And this expansion of congressional power, warned by our framers that we should never let happen, is not something that Congress is going to control for themselves. It's something that we have to control for them. And it's about time we stop allowing the federal government to expand their own power through the excuse of money. And perhaps it's about time we stop sending them the money to do that. What do you think, America? It's our liberty and their greed. God bless. See you tomorrow.